Greetings to all of you, my brothers and sisters of the soil, all of you who've come to join me for this, our 6th Sunday after Pentecost. Here's a word from Isaiah, a word I hope you will receive, that it might be well planted in your spirit. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and succeed in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress, instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle. And that shall be to the Lord for a memorial, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Isaiah 55, 10 through 13. And then from the gospel here, the gospel according to Matthew chapter 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. A good yield indeed. Here from Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 9, and then 18 through 23. I hope it shall be obvious by the time you have heard the end of this sermon that it is a tale of two boys. Long ago, visible still through the mists of memory, there was a boy who struggled with indolence while learning his Latin. Others had told him it was a dead language, and he, upon hearing so astute an observation, decided the conjugation of hic, haec, hoc in all 5 cases and in the singular and the plural to boot was a waste of time. This was all the support his lethargy of mind required. What's the use? He demurred, and so, the matter settled, he proceeded to fail at Latin. But he had a teacher who would not allow him uninterrupted to languish in his aversion to the ancient language, which for all of its unfamiliarity to him was nonetheless very much alive. Her name was Miss Brinley. He did not know her first name, for in those days it was not considered appropriate for students to be that familiar with their great eminences, their tutors, and their mentors. Nonetheless, she, as all other teachers, could not have escaped receiving an appellation that her students would devise, sometimes flattering, but most often decidedly unflattering. Ma Brimley, stuck because she was given to wearing dresses that emphasized her advanced age. The kind of attire that eschewed excess color but bore a print of snowfall at midnight. A scalloped collar hid the slender thread of chain that attached to the old-made glasses she wore, the glasses that seemed to magnify her eyes when she looked through the bubbled prism. When she spoke Latin, the saliva would shape a white froth in the corners of her mouth. Her delinquent student would often wonder how it could be she did not know how to spit. He giggled from within. What a delight it would be if she might one day just lose her sense of rigid decorum just long enough to spit. She did not stray from her assigned duty to teach, and to teach lavishly for the bright and dull alike. Her focus on each of her charges was as tightly coiled as the curls at the nape of her neck. She was undeterred by youthful insolence, nor did she grant any quarter to sleepy boredom in the reading of Julius Caesar's account of the Gallic Wars. So this extravagant woman, so well acquainted with Caesar's prose, Virgil's poetry, and St. Augustine's Confessions, called her derelict student into her office for a private consultation. She was matter of fact but gentle in what she said to him. Indeed, she was so congenial in manner that he was confounded that she had not jabbed her finger accusingly at him for his torpor. He was utterly unprepared for what she would say, but he would remember it always as though the seed of it had rooted itself in the deepest hidden recess of his spirit. Edward? No one in those days called me Edward. It was so formal, so adult, so responsible. But she said it as though I were all those things at once. It frightened the spit out of me because I sputtered in response. Yes, ma'am. She fixed me through those thick lenses of hers, and in a tone as confidential as it was predicting, she told me I was underplaying my gifts, that they were intended to flourish and not to die. She said she saw something I could not, but that one day the truth of what she saw would become apparent even to me, beyond any need for argument or cajoling. She spoke of my destiny. Destiny! With a capital D. Even then, I had just enough sense to understand that the meaning of that word was both inspiring and terrifying. In that moment when she used that word, that seed, I was more petrified than elevated. The word seemed to me even then inapplicable to one so small, so blissfully ignorant of Latin, and more besides. Destiny? What destiny? She assured me it was bright. And this knowledge would grow in me with abounding delight. The beginning of the Roman Catholic Mass, I later learned, had it right. After all, a Deum qui laetificat, even to meum, to God who gives joy to my youth. Ma Brinley had been so careless in the casting of seed, but I am ever grateful that she did not ignore the boy who would have been satisfied had she ignored him enough that he might just have failed. Her word did not return to her void, but it accomplished that for which it had been purposed. Edward, here I am. My cousin Cy is younger than I am. I suspect I may have 10 years or more on him, but advancing age draws us closer and closer all the while. He and I have had opportunity to reconnect during the age of pandemic because as I have posted these sermons, Cy found me here on Facebook and YouTube. He has since become one of my most ardent listeners. Eventually, he called me, and he and I have conferred on what God has been doing in Cy's life of late. I hope Cy will not mind my divulging this childhood memory, of which I am so fond. When Cy was a wee boy, he took an inordinate joy in watching the professional wrestlers. You know the kind, the golden-haired strutters and the preening muscled wonders. The drama of their competitions, the play acting with the rituals of gesture and bravado within a roped stage. All of this, my siblings and I soon learned Cy could mimic and play out for us on the front porch of our house. He was so small, so young, so ill-suited to the role that we would burst with laughter, prompting and urging him on to repeat the moves we found the most hilarious. Cy was always too eager to comply, and he would work out variations on moves with improvisational virtuosity. Oh, Cy was himself a wonder. We had no idea, however, that Cy was so spellbound by the promise of becoming a wrestling entertainer that he might actually become one. Through dint of will, highly focused bodybuilding, and determined training, Cy became a professional wrestler at last. At a peak moment in his career, he performed before a crowd of more than 10,000 spectators in Pittsburgh's old Civic Arena. The arena has long since succumbed to the gradual spread of gentrification in the downtown area of the city, and with it went the career that Cy had enjoyed until one too many concussions forced him to an adjacent career in security. In his new occupation, Cy was a part of a worldwide corporation to provide protection for the rich and the famous. Discretion for Cy and his former clients forbids I mention any of them by name, though I ache to do so. After all, you would recognize them instantly because they're famous. But now Cy had called me several weeks ago to tell me his life was undergoing still another change, a curious permutation for which he felt unprepared, but fully willing in spirit. We talked at length about his commitment to heed the call, the holy call of God that held him in its grip. He had been thrown and pinned as ever he had been thrown from a ring and pinned in a match before thousands of screaming fans. But now, there were no paying customers, no onlookers, just him and the Spirit of the Lord wrestling through the night like Jacob with the angel at Penuel. My cousin Cy saw the face of God, and now his life has been changed forever. I suspect he will not require a change of name. For me, he always will be my Cy, whose full Arabic name I always had trouble learning when we were children. Cy Salih Agawazi Muhammad Lahab III. Woo! It's still a mouthful, but he had other names when he wrestled for applause. Sergeant Cy Youngblood, the Iraqi Assassin, Jumping Jack Flash, and last but not least, and I must confess my personal favorite, the Chocolate Playboy. I am uncertain exactly when the seed of the word fell into the spirit of my younger cousin. But by his own testimony, he is no longer, as he puts it, a Bedouin searching through vast deserts. Reverend Cy Ali became an ordained minister in 2018. I don't know much about the kind of soil either he or I represent in Jesus' parable. In either case, I suspect we were unlikely soils in which a garden might bloom. All I know is that Cy and I are both grateful for the liberality, indeed the recklessness with which the sower of the parable casts the seed of the word. I am less concerned, therefore, with the nature of the soils onto which the seed might fall. I'm full of praise for the marvelous power of the seed itself. After all, it is the power of that seed that leads both Cy and me out in joy and brings us back again in peace. The mountains for him on the west coast and the mountains and hills here for me in the east burst into song, in the trees of the fields are even now clapping their hands. I'm just now here in the month of July, preparing for a new school year to commence in August at Mary Baldwin University, a brave little school nestled in the Shenandoah Valley. Students will blink at the threat of pandemic to be in seat and to be in remote locations so that they may receive the learning my colleagues and I seek to impart. Among them will be the indolent, the shy, the undisciplined, the lazy, the smart, and the daft. Some are full of fervor and fire to consume the learning that inspires, but others will be slow and reticent and full of foreboding that they are out of their depth. But we, my colleagues and I, will cast our seed with profligate abandon over all of them, all of them, just the same. We will tell them what we see in them, each of them, before ever they discern it for themselves. We will frighten them with big words and small ones too, for the seeds of knowledge are often lost amid the false sheen of large, gleaming distractions that seduce feeble, benighted minds. Still, if we are lucky, we may be able finally to give them something worth cheering about and something sacred, something beyond themselves, but in them too. Something just now, whispering, calling, singing their names, their names, their names. Excuse me. I hear someone calling my name. Mom Brinley, is that you? Amen.